People of God, we stand now at the threshold of a night that is unlike any other, a night appointed, a night observed, a night that bears the weight of mystery and the voice of warning. For tonight, November 24, is not simply another page on the calendar. It is a watch night, a moment when the veil between what is seen and unseen grows thin, when the signs that have been unfolding for seasons converge with a clarity that cannot be ignored. Tonight marks a crossing of boundaries, a turning point in the spiritual realm. In ancient times, nights like this were known as appointed times, moments when nations would be weighed, when kings would be warned, and when a people would be called to return to the path they had forsaken. And so tonight the call comes again. An IGHT of Ravalion tonight, the pattern that has echoed through Scripture throughout the ages rises again. For there comes a moment when a nation stands at the edge of a decision, when darkness presses in, when truth is contested, when the foundations tremble. But throughout history, the God who sees in secret reveals what has been hidden. He exposes what lies in the shadows. He uncovers what men have tried to conceal. Tonight is such a night of exposure, of uncovering, of revelation. An IGHT off cons EQNCE, we must understand this nights like this are not given for curiosity. They are not for speculation or fear. They are for alignment. For when the night holds weight, the people must decide which foundation they will stand upon. Will it be the shifting sands of culture, pride, and rebellion, or the unshakable rock from which the ancient paths flow? Every sign that has been sounded, every warning that has been raised, has been preparing for moments just like this. Moments when a nation must choose whom it will follow. A IGHT of Rituaran, but hear this clearly. The purpose of the warning is always mercy. The purpose of the alarm is always hope. The purpose of the shaking is always return. Tonight calls the people, not to fear, but to humbling, repentance awakening. For if darkness rises, it is only that the light may shine brighter. If the storm gathers, it is for the cleansing that follows. If the foundations tremble, it is so the true foundation may be revealed. Tonight calls each of us to stand, to watch, to pray, to align our lives with what is eternal. THE, Phenol, or D. So let this be the word for this night. Do not treat November 24 as an ordinary night. Do not sleep through the hour of watching. Do not ignore the signs that have been converging at your very doorstep. Stand at your post. Lift your eyes. Seek the one who still speaks in the night. For what happens tonight matters. And the choices made in this hour will echo far beyond this moment. Let the watchmen take their place. Let the hearts of the people return. And let this night become the turning that leads to awakening. Be vigilant. Be discerning. Be ready. The significance of this night rests in the understanding that not all moments in time carry the same weight. There are days that pass quietly, unnoticed, blending into the rhythm of ordinary life. And then there are moments that rise above the rest. Moments that seem to hold their breath. Moments that feel charged with meaning. Moments that stand at the intersection of the natural and the spiritual. This night, November 24, is portrayed as one of those moments. It is described as an appointed time, not by human decision, but by a higher design. Throughout history, there have always been seasons when events on earth align with deeper currents moving in the unseen realm. And this night is spoken of as one of these convergences. To call a night appointed is to say that it carries purpose, that something about it has been set apart. It suggests that there is intention behind it, that the events surrounding it are not random or accidental. The ancient world had words for such moments, times when heaven and earth seemed to draw closer, when clarity came to those who were watching, and when warnings or revelations were released into the world. This night is framed in that very same way, as though it has been prepared long before we reached it, waiting for the people of this time to arrive and stand within it. When a night like this is declared, it is not meant to inspire fear but awareness. It calls attention to the possibility that something meaningful is unfolding, something that requires the heart to be awake, the eyes open, the spirit attentive. The idea behind an appointed moment is that it invites participation. It invites people to see beyond the surface of events and recognize that there is a divine rhythm at work. This night is presented as a turning point, a threshold between what has been and what is to come. And those who understand its weight are encouraged to approach it not casually, but with a sense of watchfulness. The suggestion that this night is no ordinary night is rooted in the belief that time itself is not uniform. Just as certain seasons bring change in the natural world, harvest, planting, storms, renewal, so too do certain moments bring change in the spiritual realm. On this night, the atmosphere is described as charged, as though the veil between the visible and the invisible is thinner, allowing insight, warning, or movement that might otherwise go unnoticed. It is portrayed as a night when patterns align, when signs that have been appearing over time converge into a clearer picture. This sense of convergence is what sets this night apart. It implies that events leading up to it have been building, that threads which may have seemed unrelated are actually part of a larger tapestry. It frames the night as a culmination, a point where past warnings, past signs, and past shifts come together to emphasize a message that can no longer be ignored. And because of that, those who are listening are urged to pay close attention, to recognize that there are moments when the ordinary becomes extraordinary by design. Ultimately, the message behind this appointed night is that time is not an endless flow without meaning. Certain moments are chosen, marked, and filled with purpose. This night is declared to be one of them, a moment not merely to be observed, but to be understood. And those who take it seriously are invited to watch, to listen, and to be prepared for what it may bring. The idea of this night being one of revelation is rooted in the timeless truth that there are moments when what has been hidden is brought into the open. In ordinary life, much happens beneath the surface. Intentions are concealed, motives are disguised, and events unfold without the full story being visible. Yet there come moments, rare, significant, and unmistakable, when the unseen suddenly comes into focus. This night, November 24, is portrayed as one of those moments of unveiling, a time when the shadows cannot hold what they once concealed, and when truth presses forward with a force that cannot be resisted. Revelation is not merely the act of seeing, it is the act of understanding. It is the moment when the pieces align, when what once seemed confusing becomes clear, when the threads of events intertwine to reveal a coherent pattern. On nights like this, the atmosphere itself feels charged, as though something long restrained is now ready to be spoken. It is as if the curtain that separates the visible from the invisible is gently pulled back, and glimpses of what has been forming behind the scenes begin to shine through. This kind of unveiling often coincides with times of tension, confusion, or uncertainty, when people sense that something is shifting around them but cannot identify what it is. Revelation serves as the answer. It brings clarity to chaos, light to darkness, insight to mystery. The portrayal of this night suggests that the months or years leading up to it have been filled with signs, subtle or overt, that pointed toward this moment of understanding. And now, on this night, those signs begin to make sense. Revelation also carries a sense of exposure. What has been hidden in the dark cannot remain hidden forever. History is full of moments when corruption, Deception or wrongdoing came into the open at just the right time, not because people finally uncovered it, but because the time itself demanded exposure. This night is depicted as one of those pivotal hours when the force of truth becomes too powerful to suppress, when hidden agendas, concealed motives, or secret movements stand at risk of being brought into the light. But revelation is not limited to exposing wrongdoing. It also uncovers the movements of the divine, the ways in which guidance, protection, or warning have been present all along. People often look back at certain seasons of their lives and only then recognize the subtle ways they were being led, protected, or warned. This night is presented as a moment when such understanding can come clearly, a moment when individuals or even whole nations may suddenly realize how the pieces fit into a larger story. There is also an urgency woven into the idea of revelation. When truth is revealed, it calls for a response. It is not simply information, it is direction. It demands attention. It asks something of the one who receives it. Revelation, by its very nature, is a turning point. It divides before and after. It marks the moment when ignorance can no longer serve as an excuse, when clarity replaces confusion, and when decisions must be made based on what is now known. In many spiritual traditions, nights like this are seen as divine invitations. Invitations to wake up, to listen, to reflect, to align one's life with what is true. They are moments when people become aware of what they have overlooked or avoided. Moments when the heart is stirred with understanding that was absent before. Moments when lies lose their power because the truth has stepped forward. Ultimately, the idea of revelation on this night speaks of awakening. It suggests a shift in perception from fog to clarity, from shadow to light, from blindness to sight. And once revelation comes, life cannot continue as it was. That is why this night is described as so significant. It is portrayed not as a random date, but as a moment when truth rises, when understanding breaks through, and when the unseen becomes seen with unmistakable clarity. A nation standing at a crossroads is more than a poetic image. It is a reality that has repeated itself throughout history. There are moments when the direction of a people, a culture, or a society hangs in a delicate balance, poised between two very different futures. This night, November 24, is described as one of those defining moments. A time when the choices made, whether consciously or unconsciously, will ripple far beyond the present hour. It is portrayed as a pivotal point where the current of events meets the will of a nation, demanding a decision that cannot be postponed indefinitely. Standing at a crossroads means that the paths ahead lead in opposite directions. One path leads toward truth, integrity, and alignment with higher principles. The other leads toward compromise, confusion, and the erosion of what once held the nation together. The crossroads metaphor captures the tension of a moment when neutrality is no longer possible. A choice must be made, even if that choice is silence. And silence itself becomes a form of direction, guiding the nation toward one end or the other. The sense of urgency linked to this night suggests that the signs leading up to this crossroads have been building for some time. Perhaps there have been warnings, small at first, then growing louder. Perhaps the cultural climate has shifted gradually until suddenly it became impossible to ignore the turning point ahead. These signs might include division, moral confusion, unrest, declining unity, or the fading of values that once defined the nation. Each sign serves as a marker pointing toward the growing need for a decision. And now, on this night, the nation is described as being pressed to choose its path. A nation's crossroads is not only about government or leaders, it is also about the people themselves. Every society is shaped by its collective choices. the ideals it upholds, the truth it honors, the principles it defends, and the voices it listens to. When a nation drifts away from what is true and foundational, it does not happen all at once. It happens in steps, in small compromises, in subtle shifts that seem insignificant at first. But there comes a moment when those steps accumulate, leading to a threshold where the direction forward must be confronted. Tonight represents that threshold. In such a moment, the consequences of drifting become visible. Confusion becomes widespread. Darkness seems to press in from all sides. Certainty erodes. The identity of the nation feels fragile, as if the ground beneath it is shifting. The crossroads forces the question, will the people choose to return to truth? Or will they continue toward paths that distance them from it? The message suggests that this night shines a spotlight on that very question, urging the nation to awaken, to recognize the gravity of its situation, and to consider the weight of its choices. Throughout history, nations that stood at such crossroads discovered that their fate was not sealed by external enemies alone, but by the internal decisions of their own people. When truth is abandoned, when justice is compromised, when moral clarity becomes blurred, the nation weakens from within. But when truth is honored, when people return to principle and light, renewal becomes possible. Crossroads are moments when renewal can begin, but only if the right path is chosen. This night is framed as a moment when the battle is not merely political or cultural, but spiritual. The crossroads represents a deeper question. Which voice will the nation follow? The voice of fear or the voice of courage? The voice of confusion or the voice of truth? The voice of self-interest or the voice of integrity? In this sense, the crossroads is not merely about society at large. It is also about the heart of every individual. For nations are shaped by the hearts of their people, and the direction of the nation hinges on the decisions made within those hearts. Ultimately, the message of the crossroads is a call to responsibility. It reminds the people that their choices matter, that their silence matters, that their prayers and actions matter. A crossroads is a moment of decision, but also an invitation to choose the path that leads to restoration, clarity, and strength. And in this vision of November 24, the night becomes a symbol of this urgent decision, a moment when the direction of the nation is not merely observed, but determined by the choices made in this critical hour. The call to return and realign is one of the most important themes woven into the message of this night. It speaks to the deep truth that every warning, every shaking, and every moment of urgency ultimately carries a purpose rooted in mercy. When a season feels intense, when signs appear, when foundations tremble, when a nation stands at a crossroads, it is not simply for judgment or fear. It is a call, a summons, an invitation for people to turn their hearts back toward what they have forgotten, neglected, or drifted away from. This night, November 24, is framed as such a moment, a night that urges a return to what is eternal and a realignment with what is true. Returning is not merely an outward action, it is an inward turning. It begins in the heart. It happens when the noise of the world grows so loud that the still, gentle voice of truth seems almost lost, until something happens that forces people to stop, listen, and recognize how far they have wandered. The message suggests that this night, in all its weight and significance, is meant to awaken that recognition. It calls individuals and even entire nations to pause and consider the direction of their lives, their values, and their priorities. Return is a word that carries both tenderness and urgency. It echoes the ancient calls spoken through prophets and teachers across the ages. Return to the path. Return to the foundation. Return to the one who guides. It implies that there was once a closeness, a clarity, a sense of purpose, but that over time, distance has grown, not because the path disappeared, but because the people slowly drifted from it. This drifting rarely happens suddenly. It happens through compromise, distraction, shifting desires, or the slow erosion of focus. Yet, even when the drift becomes wide, the call to return remains open. Realignment is the natural partner of return. To realign is to bring one's life, one's decisions, and one's heart back into agreement with what is right and true. When something is misaligned, it does not function as it should. A wheel slightly off center will shake a vehicle. A foundation slightly askew will eventually destabilize an entire structure. In the same way, when the soul drifts out of alignment, when values shift, when truth is overshadowed by confusion, when priorities become distorted, the life built upon it inevitably begins to show the strain. Realignment is the act of recognizing the imbalance and choosing to correct it before the consequences grow worse. The message of this night emphasizes that such realignment is not a burden, but a gift. It is a doorway back to stability, clarity, and peace. When a nation or individual returns to truth, the fog lifts, the confusion clears, strength begins to rise again. And this night is portrayed as one of those rare opportunities when the invitation to return is especially strong, as if the heavens themselves are urging a course correction. But this call is not merely personal, it is collective. When a nation drifts, it affects families, communities, and generations. False narratives rise, division deepens, shadows lengthen. This is why the message frames the night as so urgent, because the return must begin before the drift becomes irreversible. Yet even in this urgency, the tone is filled with hope. It declares that restoration is possible, renewal is possible, awakening is possible, but only if hearts are willing to turn back. In times of cultural upheaval, people often look outward for solutions. They hope for the right leader, the right policy, the right circumstance to bring healing. But the message of realignment reminds us that lasting change begins within. A nation cannot return unless its people return. A culture cannot realign unless the hearts that shape it rediscover truth and anchor themselves once again in what is enduring. Ultimately, this night's call is a reminder that every moment of warning is also a moment of mercy. The shaking is not the end, it is the wake up. The crossroads is not the collapse, it is the chance to choose well. And the return is not just a spiritual act, it is a restoration of identity, purpose, and direction. This night invites people to rediscover what they've lost, reclaim what they've neglected, and realign themselves with the path that leads to life, hope, and clarity once again. A night marked with consequence and responsibility carries a weight that cannot be ignored because it reminds us that time itself is not passive. Time is not an endless flow of meaningless hours. There are moments within it that stand like pillars, moments when the decisions made or the decisions avoided will shape everything that follows. This night is described as such a moment, a time when the people are called not simply to observe what is happening around them, but to respond with intentionality, discernment, and courage. It is a night that emphasizes that choices matter, that silence matters, and that the posture of the heart matters in ways that extend far beyond a single evening. Responsibility is often misunderstood in ordinary life. Many assume it is simply doing what one must or fulfilling duties imposed by others. But in the deeper, spiritual sense, responsibility is the recognition that one's actions carry weight, not only in the physical world, but in the unseen realm as well. It means understanding that every decision, every alignment, every stand or lack of stand contributes to the shaping of the culture, the nation, and the future. This night is portrayed as a moment when such responsibility rises to the surface, when the urgency of the hour presses upon individuals and communities alike, calling them to wakefulness. The idea of consequence is not meant to instill fear, but to reveal reality. Every seed planted will eventually bear fruit. Every course chosen will lead to a destination. The steps taken today shape the outcomes of tomorrow. When a night carries consequence, it means that the direction set in this hour will influence the unfolding of days ahead. It suggests that there is a narrow window in which decisions must be made, a window that cannot remain open forever. If ignored, opportunities are lost. If responded to rightly, renewal begins. The message speaks to the need for awareness, for recognizing that this particular night stands as a dividing line of sorts, a moment demanding attention and discernment. In times like these, many people prefer to turn away from responsibility and focus on distractions or comforts. It is easier to ignore the weight of the moment than to acknowledge it. But the message insists that this is not a night for spiritual sleep. It is a night for watchfulness. Watching is not passive. It requires intentionality, a willingness to stay awake, to observe what others overlook, to remain sensitive to the shifts taking place beneath the surface of everyday life. Watchfulness is a discipline that guards the heart and allows a person to see clearly in a time of confusion. This night challenges people to take their place, not in fear, but in readiness. It calls them to be aware of the influences pulling at them, the voices shaping their thoughts, the pressures attempting to mold their decisions. Responsibility means choosing which voice to follow. It means refusing to be swept along by the currents of the moment and instead standing firm in what is true. It asks people to consider the impact of their silence or their boldness or their compromise. It asks them to recognize that neutrality is impossible at a crossroads. Every choice or lack of choice sets a direction. Responsibility also involves stewardship, the understanding that each person has been entrusted with influence, whether small or great. Families look to parents. Communities look to leaders. Nations look to the collective voices of their people. When individuals rise to their responsibility, their courage strengthens others. When they shrink back, confusion spreads. This night serves as a reminder that every person has a role in shaping the moral and spiritual climate of their surroundings. In the end, the message of consequence and responsibility is not meant to burden, but to awaken. It calls people to step out of complacency and into awareness, to see that their actions today echo into tomorrow. This night urges them to stand watchfully, to choose wisely, and to recognize the power and importance of their decisions. For the weight of this moment is not simply in what happens around them, but in how they respond and in the path their response sets for the future that will unfold. The charge to the Watchman carries with it a sense of urgency, purpose, and sacred responsibility. It is not a casual invitation, nor is it offered to those who wish to drift through the night unaware. It is a call directed toward those who are willing to stand, to see, and to remain awake when others fall asleep. This night, November 24, is framed as a moment when the watchmen must rise to their appointed place. For the times demand clarity, courage, and vigilance. The image of the watchman is ancient, yet its meaning is timeless. Someone positioned at a height, someone who sees what others cannot yet see, someone who bears the responsibility of sounding the alarm when danger approaches or when revelation dawns. A watchman is not merely a spectator. A watchman is entrusted with insight. Their role is not passive observation, but active attention. They must remain alert, discerning movements in the distance, recognizing patterns in the darkness, and perceiving shifts, before the rest of the people are aware of them. This image suggests that in times of spiritual or cultural significance, there must be those who are awake, awake to truth, awake to the signs, awake to the state of the nation, and awake to the whisperings that echo through the unseen realm. This night calls for such awakening, urging those with discernment not to neglect the responsibility of watching. The watchman's position is often lonely. Others may be distracted by daily life, absorbed in routine, or lulled into complacency. But the watchman must resist the comfort of sleep. They must remain standing when others sit, listening when others turn away, perceiving what others ignore. This solitude is part of the calling. It sharpens the senses, deepens perception, and cultivates a posture that is ready to act when action is required. The message of this night suggests that such a posture is needed now more than ever, that there are unfolding events, rising tensions, and hidden movements that require spiritual alertness. Being a watchman also means being willing to speak. It is not enough to see. The watchman must warn, guide, encourage, or illuminate. Their voice carries the urgency of what they witness. It is a voice that cries out when danger is near, but also a voice that calls people back to what is true. This night emphasizes the importance of such voices, for in seasons of confusion, deception grows easily, and truth becomes harder to discern. The watchman's voice cuts through that confusion, reminding the people of the path they must take and the realities they must face. Yet the charge is not one of fear, it is one of readiness. Watchmen do not stand on the wall in despair, but in preparation. They look not only for danger, but for signs of hope, for the first light of dawn, for the movements that signal a turning point. The message suggests that this night carries both warning and promise, that while darkness may press in, it is not absolute, and the watchman's role is to recognize both the threat and the possibility of awakening. Their vigilance becomes a source of strength for others who might falter or lose sight. In calling forth the watchman, this night challenges every individual to examine their own role. Not everyone stands on a physical wall, but each person has a sphere of influence, a family, a community, a circle of relationships. In each of these places, there is a need for those who remain grounded, discerning, and courageous. The call is not limited to those with titles or authority. It is extended to anyone willing to see clearly and act faithfully. Ultimately, the charge to the watchman is a call to rise above passivity. It is a call to awareness, to spiritual sensitivity, to moral courage. It declares that the times are too significant for complacency, that the hour is too critical for silence, and that the night is too heavy for sleep. This night invites people to take their place with vigilance and determination, knowing that what they see, how they respond, and whether they choose to stand may influence the direction of many who follow. And so, the watchmen are summoned, not with fear, but with purpose, not with dread, but with strength, not with uncertainty, but with the assurance that their watch matters profoundly in this crucial hour.